Okay, greetings and welcome to what we're calling today beyond the playbook, not behind the playbook, building a unified, intelligent safety hub for your schools. We're broadcasting today from the Secure Passage Customer Experience Center in Kansas City, and it's great to be with you. We have a live audience today, as well as those of you joining us from around the nation. We're grateful that you're here for a very important conversation around school safety. And in a moment, we're going to meet a panel of experts, really top minds in the country on the matter of school safety. What we're going to find in this conversation today, I'm sure, is that school safety is evolving tremendously. Traditional playbooks around safety can't seem to keep up with today's disconnected systems and manual processes, siloed data that really leave dangerous gaps in visibility in our security for our schools, and especially for the purposes of response when it matters most. True protection, we believe, requires connection across the ecosystem between systems, people, and purpose. Secure Passage has been built on 25 years of proven success in operational unification, bringing these things together. Our Haystacks Operational Intelligence solution serves as a central hub for campus safety, giving administrators, security teams, first responders, a single shared view of risk across the schools and across the communities. So today, together, we're going to explore a little bit about how to eliminate blind spots by closing communication gaps between teams, systems, and response agencies. We're going to talk about integrating key safety tools and safety assessments for building plans on emergency protocols and communication, bringing that all into one cohesive command environment. We'll talk about delivering real-time intelligence that keeps all personnel, law enforcement, etc., aligned during critical events, and transform safety operations from reactive measures to more proactive readiness and strategic foresight. So the time for fragmented school safety and school safety operations is over. It's a thing of the past. School safety is just one of those topics that requires real talk. Oftentimes we'll have a white paper, we'll have a position that has been published about school safety, but nothing is better than having a conversation around this. There's way too much noise around school safety, point solutions that, certainly make sense on paper, but may not look as sensible when you start looking at the overall picture of school safety. So when we talk about beyond the traditional playbook, we're talking about building unified intelligence and safety ecosystems for your schools that are more comprehensive. Let's talk about our panelists today. And like I said, they are top experts. The first person that we have on the panel is Doug Pasley. Doug Pasley is the Vice President of Field Operations here at Secure Passage. He brings a ton of critical infrastructure security experience to the field. He's a retired policeman from the Tampa Police Department and a former critical infrastructure manager at the Tampa Bay Urban Area Security Initiative in their Fusion Center. Doug has conducted more than 2,000 vulnerability assessments for critical infrastructure, and in his current role, he leverages his experience to assist Secure Passage customers in employing those top-tier agency solutions for collecting, prioritizing, and assessing critical infrastructure, especially the critical infrastructure that we call our schools. Lucas Perfetti is with us today. He's a solutions engineer here at Secure Passage, and he really partners with schools, local governments, K through 12, to successfully implement solutions across government sectors. He's been with police departments, EMS, K through 12 schools over the past few years, and he specializes in a topic that is very interesting in school safety these days. It's called behavioral threat assessment and management. We'll be covering that with Lucas today, but he will help you streamline your reporting. He'll help you implement your systems, really get you organized for your real world campus security needs. And then finally, we have with us, very happy to have Chief John Newman, Chief of Police of the Hillsborough County Public Schools. Chief Newman manages the Security and Emergency Management Division for Hillsborough County Public Schools, HCPS. And in his current role, Chief Newman is charged with deploying and managing the security assets at nearly 300 sites around Hillsborough County. An interesting thing to note about the Hillsborough County School District, it is the seventh largest district in the nation with over 228,000 students, 25,000 employees, and 389 people on John Newman's team. 389 officers. That's larger than most police departments here in Kansas and Missouri, for example. It also, as a school district, follows New York, Chicago, Philadelphia. You go down the line and boom, there's Hillsborough County. So a huge district with a lot of folks assigned to the middle schools, high schools, et cetera, for law enforcement and the support of our students and our faculty and staff. Also importantly, he has served as a member of the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, a group that has refined and elevated the school safety discussion and solutions nationwide. So today I want to spend a little time talking about probing and high-level topics for school safety, and I'm going to get over to the group really quickly. Now, to begin, gentlemen, I just want to start with an easy question. You know, over the course of the last 10 years, for example, on a scale of 1 to 10, and Doug, I'll start with you, and then we'll move to Chief Newman, and we'll move to Lucas. On a scale of 1 to 10, are American schools safer than they were 10 years ago, or are they less safe? And then put that number on there for us as you will as an Olympic judge. Doug.
I think that's a hard. I think that's kind of a hard piece. I would say in Florida, because of what has happened post Parkland with the MSD, I'd say we're definitely, at a 7, 8, on that. Nationwide, as we've looked at this, and when I'm going out in the field and I'm working with our other customers in it, sometimes we get the illusion of security, and sometimes I don't. There's not the mandates that I think Chief Newman will talk about later today or later in the session that actually makes them do certain things. And once you have those mandates, that I think that's what drives to the accountability and then the safety. I do think overall nationwide, just because the awareness, the things that are going on, but I do think there's a lot of room for improvement, especially, when you start talking about the mandates and accountability and looking at things as they happen.
Thank you, Doug. Now, Chief, last 10 years, you've seen a lot in Florida, been working with us over the course of that decade and more. Tell us your opinion of Florida and then nationwide.
I think Doug brings up a really good point. When you have 14 dead students and 3 dead faculty members, things have a tendency to get done at the legislative level. That expedites everything. Although we've seen that across the country with horrible events that have happened at our schools, and the legislative folks get together and they have some really good ideas and they have some great best practice recommendations, but it lacks action. I was down there in my position when Parkland happened in February 14th of 2018. 7 years since that event, every year we have legislative mandates. And it's not just mandates, but there's accountability mechanisms built into that. I'll be interested to hear what Luke said, because we're leaning now, as we go from year 1 post Parkland to now year 8, the emphasis is really on mental health and behavioral threat assessment teams and getting resources to that discipline. I think as a state, we're probably at a 7.5. There's 67 safe school specialists in Florida. I'm the one for Hillsborough, which is the greater Tampa Bay area. Every county has one. And we have accountability. We get audited every day and inspected every day by the Florida Department of Education's Office of Safe Schools. So not only do they mandate certain things in the state of Florida, but they have follow-up and accountability, and they have audits and inspections, and you have to report those. So you don't want to be that school district that fails an audit because the sole person responsible for that failure is the superintendent and the safe school specialist. I think Doug is right. Nationwide, the conversation has become very lively because of some tragedies. but it's got to transcend just conversation. It's got to become action. Can't look good on paper. It's got to look good at execution. So I give our state about a 7.5 because any one of the specialists will tell you I have a lot more I can do in the Tampa Bay area with Hillsborough County schools. And we all say that about our districts, and we move towards those mandates every day. Nationwide, conversations happening. It's happening with really talented districts, really talented and smart people, but it's got to be at the execution level where you really make that measurement. And I would think nationwide where it's less than 5 if I had to give it a number. I just don't get the vibe or the feeling when I speak to my out-of-state colleagues that don't live in a mandated state like I do in Florida, that they're thinking about doing this and they might try that. That doesn't get things done. That doesn't move the needle. So I think we have a lot of work to do in that regard across the country.
We'll have some follow-up questions for you. There's a lot to unpack in what you just said, sir. And with respect to the 1 to 10 coming over to you, Lucas, the chief mentioned behavioral threat assessment and management as one of the pillars that might be assisting with us propping up school safety. But what do you see? And you happen to be from the greater Chicago area as well, so that might be in context of Illinois.
Yeah, well, I think in general, right, as the technology landscape evolves, so do the vulnerabilities, right? So while the opportunity to have to have that 10 number is there right now, it's achievable. Scalability, accountability is a major highlight that Chief brought up. I think those are things, in theory, we can be at a 10 as a nation, but right now, I would say we're on the lower side of 5 as well, right? From a behavioral threat perspective, when I started here, we were looking at nationwide a 1, right? To be completely fair, some of the more advanced districts were adapting some type of a process, but now we're starting to see it evolving rapidly, right? And now we're probably at about a 4 or 5 in the behavioral space, but there's still a lot of room to grow, right? So with technology, it's fantastic. You are able to close some of these loops and unify your systems, get more insights, but that data as well can be used against you. So you need to keep evolving and being proactive and moving forward in front of whoever may be the perp, for lack of a better term.
Excellent. We talk about unifying different systems and different kinds of solutions. I'm going to come to you, Chief, to ask what you're seeing that needs to be unified, what you perhaps have unified within the haystack solution, for example, or other solutions. I'm curious to hear what you think does need to come together and be correlated such that your team has the picture they need, not only to understand what's happening on a daily basis, but what's happening in the case of a fast-moving incident.
No, that's a great point. I think, first of all, technology is, to me, the ultimate silo buster, right? But it also can build those silos up. For me, with haystacks, the very first thing I had to find out when I got to the school district, and I came from law enforcement, 30 years with the Tampa Police Department. With so many campuses in our district, I need to know what each campus needed for hardening, right? Mm-hmm. And there was such an emphasis after Parkland about hardening. How do you make your campuses safe? What does that look like? And I couldn't do that without technology and, be honest with you, doing those assessments, putting all that data into a platform so I can see it from that lifeguard stand, right? So I can see the entire district and find out what our needs were, put those needs in a priority list. Some of them even the criticality, what are the most critical hardening issues I had to do. Once I got done with that, and that was a couple of years before the mandates, using the Haystacks platform, it allowed me to say, okay, here's my resource allocation. How much money do I have for fencing? How much money do I have for access control? Where's my worst vulnerability? Which ones do I have to deal with first? Do I need a vestibule or will a gate suffice? So you really looked at your physical space. Even after Parkland, the very first couple of years, it was about the built environment of your campus and how could you make that safer. You need to be able to see all those things, especially technology. Most of you have heard of the Alyssa's Law, so you have a way to talk to your 911 centers. You can call for help anytime, anywhere, put that school into a lockdown protocol while the the cavalry is responding. Well, we have to be able to see that in one place. And then cameras started being on the landscape. How do you see the cameras, and how do you see that in the vulnerability platforms that you created? Well, by plotting cameras, I went to my campuses, looked at where the vulnerable areas were, and that's how we plotted cameras. So having all that data in one place give you a different scope of work that you can prioritize with. Moving forward, as more technology like AI comes aboard, you got to find out where that fits in your multi-layer security response. What does that look like? And AI was a year ago than it is now. We've had some great conversations the last couple of days about where AI is going. I don't know where that's going to fit for me yet. And if it does, how do I prioritize it? So for me in the beginning, it was to look at my built environment and then to mesh those technologies in one place. So I'm not opening up several different platforms to look at one event or one crisis. And then you practice with it. How do you train with that technology or that built environment that you installed? That's the reality of it. Your end user, how can they make your school safe with all those things that we're going to provide them? You've got to train and you got to practice that. So it takes all those different components, and every day the landscape changes. Just being with a lot of tech people the last couple of days, I'm like, man, I don't know anything about technology, right? This is amazing. But you have to find out where that fits in your model. And that's what we've done so far. We started out really basic, and we're moving up that hierarchy of different platforms, but we have to be able to, it has to be readily accessible, it's got to be consumable, and it's got to be actionable for me. And if it doesn't hit those three things, I have issues with it.
You mentioned artificial intelligence, and yeah, you can't have a conversation in technology or security right now without artificial intelligence being mentioned. It is going to, in the near term, improve our ability, number one, to set up the right set of rules to deal with incoming incidents that we don't expect, and even to help with the events that we plan to have occur in our ecosystems and in our environments. But the purpose of this, beyond that basic understanding, is going to be the workflows that artificial intelligence can provide. Humans are going to have a place in school security going forward, but there will certainly be response tools that need to be integrated into your workflows such that when you do have an incident, you're talking about seconds or even milliseconds to response rather than minutes, oftentimes in traditional security. Doug, I'm going to come to you now because I'm basically going to ask you the question. The chief wants to do all the things that he just talked about, and you're starting with a brand new district or a brand new state that wants to implement their blueprint to get to where Chief Newman and Hillsborough County Public Schools are today. How do you begin? And I know it's probably with a physical assessment and other assessments, but walk us through how a district would get started correlating their technologies.
I think because of all this battle-born stuff that we've done in Florida with Chief Newman, and what he didn't say was he was starting this before Parkland. He was cataloging and assessing his facilities before it was a mandate, because he realized it. Through that process and learning, and then again, like you said, February 14th changed our life as a company, as well as those schools. We had to quickly get spun up and be able to bring. At the time, we had 6 school districts that voluntarily did this. The major one being Hillsborough, but the others were some small ones that had 5 and 6 schools. But we had to quickly spin up 3,764 schools in the state of Florida. From basically, they passed the law in July, and before school went back in August, we had to do that. So we, as a technology company, quickly learned. Now when we bring a client on, everybody's always got a spreadsheet and unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people are keeping their current list of schools and stuff, is on a spreadsheet. We can suck in that spreadsheet in a matter of seconds. We did a school district here a couple months ago. Within 5 minutes, we had their 100 assets. we can match that with their point of contact. So if they have those lists, which most of them do have the list, whether it's just an asset catalog or whatever, quickly be able to bring those in, get it up, let them see it on the map, start getting and get that visibility of what's there. And then the next thing that we do is we do hit on those vulnerability assessments. So then they can start seeing, what's our campuses look like. Again, I think for this battle that we've been fighting, for the last 7 years post Parkland, we also have studied the game. We all study every time there's a shooting. We're in after action reports. We're looking at them. We're looking at them. So an assessment that I was proud to do 7 years ago, I would probably be embarrassed to show you today, right? But when I wrote it 7 years ago, I thought that was the best assessment that we ever had, right? And so now we've got 7 years, 8 years of being able to do it. And believe me, if there's a school shooting tomorrow, we're going to modify that vulnerability assessment to look at what's the current, you hate to say trends, but what's the current issues going on. And so again, you're not only able to quickly catalog, but you're able to quickly assess and look and kind of see where your schools are at. And you're also looking at the latest issues that are going on in schools. So we can quickly do that. I think right now, in a matter of 2 weeks, we can have people out assessing and looking at their school campuses from the moment we sign the contract.
Thank you. Source of truth sounds like it's particularly important.
I think that's the most important, because if you don't start with that source of truth, knowing where those schools are, being able to look at them on a map, being able to see and then see what they have, it doesn't make sense to bring in other technologies or other tools if you don't even know what you have.
Right. There's another form of assessment. I mentioned this a little bit earlier that seems to be gaining in popularity, but this isn't a popularity sport. It is a necessity sport, and that has to do with behavioral threat assessment and management. So, Lucas, I'm coming to you, of course. It's another form of assessment, and I'll say that within the Haystacks platform, you have an assessment, and you want to run that assessment on a regular basis. We'll make sure that that assessment is loaded for you. Even these vulnerability assessments can be customized. I believe Sheriff Gualtieri in Pinellas County, just across the way, he added a couple of hundred more questions to an assessment as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's the leader of the MSD commission. And so when we do talk to the school safety specialists and they go, this is a pretty big assessment, why are we doing this? I say, hey, you want to do the one Sheriff Gualtieri really wants you to do? It's about 900 questions, right? And so, yeah, we can tailor those, do it, put it right to the needs of the school.
Excellent. So to behavioral threat assessment, Lucas, it wasn't too long ago that I believe we were standing at a National School Resource Association meeting. And I asked a leader of a school resource team down in Knoxville, Tennessee, just out of curiosity, are you doing anything with behavioral threat assessment? Expecting a no. Or that's verboten. We don't like to go toward mental wellness. Instead, they said, yeah, we've been doing that for 10 years. It's a really important program. And at the time, that was just a couple of years ago, it seemed very unique. What are you seeing today in the field? And then I know that some of this is being mandated in states as well, Lucas. Tell us a little bit about that landscape and how it's been adopted, behavioral threat assessment and management, beyond just having a team in the school.
Yeah, well, I will say that that BTAM team is the first step, right? Creating that team, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the mandates coming from, is at least having that team and some form of an assessment in place, right? It really just depends, we see a variation from district to district, state to state, like in the physical world, it's constantly evolving, right? No client, even if they're following the same model, is going to have the same questions that they're asking. There are things that are unique to demographics of your area, right? But overall, I think we've seen kind of an explosion from a BTAM perspective, right? 2 years ago, when I went to any type of school resource officer conference or anything like that, the most advanced system or process was, hey, we have something on Microsoft Works, we have some kind of a workflow through Google Docs, something like that. We're starting to see that moved over into a more secure system, like BTAM, right? It's just like Doug was expressing as well from a physical side, you need that base set of data in order to make any informed decisions. Really what's critical is understanding a student's baseline, and every student's baseline is going to be different, right? And unless you have an SRO in that building that knows every single student, very, very well, you're not going to be able to find that baseline without that data source. You need to understand that in order to make informed decisions, right? Because with this process, we're looking to be proactive and mitigate any potential risk that could come up. And it's pretty proven at this point, whether it's Secret Service or any other organization, there are signs. There are signs that lead up to any type of mass casualty event or anything along those lines. And collecting that data is absolutely crucial. Collecting and sharing that data is crucial in the process.
Well, one of the things that we used to say in our insider threat work, and I'll come over to you, Doug, is that, our job is to turn people around, not turn people in. And it's very difficult in a case of mental wellness to turn people around if you're not permitted to talk about it, if you're not permitted to gather information that, yes, will be, personal medical information or other potentially sensitive personally identifiable information. And what we have experienced as we've gone into districts, Lucas has seen it firsthand. He mentioned Google Docs, he mentioned Excel spreadsheets or Word documents that are the repository for the information that you're collecting, maybe interviews that you're holding on individuals that are having true mental wellness issues. And so, are you HIPAA compliant in your process? Are you FERPA compliant? Now that's on you, the school, but at the same time too, these are important considerations, because if you're taking notes on a legal pad next to the school psychologist or counselor's computer and or storing this kind of information in these unprotected solutions, you're going to have leakage. And the last thing that you want is the data on your students going anywhere but to that student or to the authorized family or guardians. Doug.
Kirk, just real quick, I wanted to get Lucas's comment on this. What we're seeing in the field too, sometimes this is law enforcement led, which will change those assessments, and sometimes it's led by mental health. And I think one thing on our platform does, it allows whoever's the practitioner that's doing it to model it, much like we talked about on the physical assets. We can tailor those questions. So a lot of times we're tailoring those, if it's a law enforcement led side or whether it's a behavioral threat, psychologist or something. And I think
you hit the nail on the head there, right? Again, it's constantly evolving, but typically, we're seeing one of the two prongs. We haven't seen a very administration led BTAM process, but we're either seeing some form of mental health, whether that's school psychologists, if they have, trained BTAM members, or even outside BTAM members, right? There's regional associations that will send mental health professionals, right? And the way that they are operating the platform is different than the way that law enforcement led BTAM teams would be operating the platform. But we're pretty flexible to accept both and work with both processes.
But so I'm listening to this because in Florida, and I don't want to be that guy, right? Every one of our schools has to have a threat assessment team on every campus. And in the Florida now, we've moved away from CSTAG, the Comprehensive Student Threat Guide, and now we're at the Florida model. They meet weekly. They have to document their notes. If it's a high disposition on that student, we have to have law enforcement involved. We have a monthly meeting with our high cases. You have to demonstrate that in notes that we submit to the state. So taking what you guys do in the platform, there's accountability in Florida that, one, they all have to have the 3-day training in the Florida model. Law enforcement, a site administrator, someone that anecdotally knows a student, and usually the assistant principal are part of that core 4. The principal can't be, because she's going to make a decision. Do I make this a low or a high disposition? So all those things require case management, And that's what you do in the platform, is to provide that case management. Having that sort of accountability on 257 school sites, that's a robust system. That's a lot of documentation that we're doing just on the mental health side. And when you looked at what happened at Parkland, that shooter got a lot of mental health services. What happened was, back in the old days, pre-Parkland, they weren't allowed to put that file with the student's CUME file. So it was a handwritten file, documentation. They did a good job, but it stayed in some cabinet at that school. There was no data sharing. If that student transferred, that file never went with them. So when you dissect and do a triage as to what they did down in Sunrise, Florida at that shooting, you realize a lot of schools were doing the same thing. They had talented, trained clinicians that were doing on-site assessments, but there was no collaboration, there was no sharing, there was no record management system. There might not have been services. The parents said, no, I don't want services, and you couldn't force it. So the report or that case management just sat there. And that's exactly what happened down in South Florida. So to have that type of record management system, that technology that allows you that case to move from one location to the other and to notify people, is a game changer when it comes to threat assessments and mental health.
And Chief really hit on a very important point here, and that is the information sharing. One thing that we're seeing and advising against is law enforcement not being involved until it's too late. Law enforcement or SRO, whatever, whoever you're having represent that part of the BTAM team should be involved early, because they are going to be seeing it through a different lens than mental health professionals. The goal is to always turn students back in and get them on the right path, but a law enforcement eye is trained differently. And sometimes we're seeing mental health professionals kind of holding back because they don't want to get a kid in trouble or something like that. And that's not the overall goal. The goal is to get them the help they need.
Well, the leading bullet point for this webinar was eliminating blind spots by increasing communication between teams, systems, and obviously response agencies. And we did see an immense disconnect between the response agencies, locally as well, with the Parkland shooting. With respect to that, then the platform is not only potentially great for communication and getting everyone on the same page within the district, but then how might you also use that information to inform wider field? Again, this is about the district maintaining control of the information that it has, right? And the things that then happen with that information. But oftentimes you have to do some sharing. That sharing might be around a man-made event, but in the state of Florida, for example, it could be a natural disaster as well, where you have to rapidly share information. Let's talk a little bit about that. We've kind of covered that a little bit of how we would share information on a student that's having a mental wellness issue or issues, but then how about beyond the borders of the schools, for example, or the walls of the schools? I guess Milton and our other hurricane experience of late might play into this. Doug.
Actually, I was going to throw it over to Chief, because I think this is the one thing that he's taken it further than anybody, and that's putting that data in there where other people can see it. One of the things, as I turn it over to him, when we do some school districts, the school safety specialist, and again, this is your data, you own it, so you tell us how you want it parsed out. But some school safety specialists don't want other principals to see at another school. Chief Newman, and one of the things that he's come out and he goes, I want every principal to be able to see other schools. Number one, I think it helps with the competitiveness to keep things up, but also you never know when that principal is going to be at another school, and kind of turn that over, especially when it comes to natural hazard.
And probably a disclaimer, like, I'm not a smart guy. This has been a journey, and, getting hooked up with the platform early before it was a mandate helped me out tremendously. But yes, we have hurricanes in Florida, if you haven't heard. And Hillsborough County is one of the largest districts in Central Florida when it comes to, sheltering. We have 63 school sites that we pop open for shelters. During Irma, we had 37,000 wonderful community residents residing in our schools. For Irene and Milton, that were last year, it was much less for a number of different reasons. But having all the information in the platform that you can customize and you can populate, there are sometimes we have shelters that come offline. You know, hurricane season starts June 1st. There's going to be a new roof put on that school. We take that school offline. To be able to go in and take that data in and out and make it very flexible is critical. You might have a hurricane on the East Coast. You know you're going to shelter for what's called when they come over from the other side, host sheltering. We're going to be a host shelter. Someone's going to come over from Volusia County or Brevard, which is on the East Coast, and they're going to stay in your place because their county's getting, you know, its butt kicked with a bad storm. We'll open up 10 shelters, and we look at the map and we find out what the populations are. And the EOC does a great job. They have their own platforms, but these are my sites. Those are my principals, and we're going to be staffing it. So we're the home team. So we have a big say in the sheltering operations in my county. You only have a big say if you put your foot down. Otherwise, the EM folks will do it all day long. So we're able to look at the shelters, see what the what the footprint is for that shelter, and can it accommodate what we want it to do. You know, if the storm goes on for 12 hours or 24, we're swapping people in and out. And we've had principals have gone to the platform to look at the physical parts of that campus that they need to be aware of: water shut off, electricity, access control. They might not work at that campus, but they're relieving the staff that does. So to have that information available before they even get to the shelter is critical. If we want to open up another shelter, I can look at the map, and if we're doing it on the I-4 or the I-75 corridor, I'll try to find schools that are off that corridor, not in a flood zone, that we can open up quickly. So the platform gives me that visual cueing that I need because I'm dealing with so many different, you know, schools that we could open. And then it also allows me to get with that principal and their backup teams to tell them, review the plan, review all the data that's in there. This way you have an understanding, some good situational awareness pre-storm that you could use. The other thing is we make them take pictures. You know, if you ever worked with FEMA before and you want to get reimbursed in the decade, you have to have pictures that are time-stamped and they give the latitude and the longitude. That might sound really simple, but they don't take Polaroids anymore. They don't take 35 millimeter. They want all the metadata behind the picture. So you can't say this building was wrecked during the storm when really 2 weeks later, you know, a car crashed into it and you're trying to beat the government out of some money, right? They want to know exactly pre and post storm photos. We do that with our inventory. So if a school is going to open up, we take pictures of that school pre-storm and post-storm. So if we do have damages, and we've had a lot of damage, you know, it's already taken care of in terms of memorializing that event. We've used it for commencement. We have 31 high schools, 10 days of graduations at the fairgrounds. We'll put our staffing data in there, the order of commencement, manpower situations. So we can stand it up for a man-made event like commencements or a natural event like hurricanes and customize for just what we want to use it for. And I find that to be really, really valuable about how flexible the platform is.
And it seems like it puts the data, as you were saying, in the people's hands that you know need it. So like you say, you've made a choice to take, you know, one principal's information, make it available to other principals so that you have a better common understanding. Certainly, if something is unfolding rapidly, you can see the hurricane coming for a while. Doug likes to talk about our cone of shame that we can see coming out of the Atlantic and toward land, but you can also respond better if it's a natural disaster that hits quickly, tornadoes, for example, you know, high winds, fires, etc. So collecting that information and putting that into one spot and then being able to share it seems like a reasonable approach going forward.
Well, you customize those filters. So like I said, I have 257 sites. I just want to see my 63 shelters. And by the way, I just want to see the pet shelters or the special needs shelters. It takes away all that clutter. You tease out a lot of data that you don't really care about in the moment, and you get to be a lot more specific and granular with the data that you need right then and there.
Thank you. And Doug? Kirk?
No, I was going to say one of the things that we always, Chief Newman had talked about it, they used to put all this in notebooks, and only one person had that notebook, right? So if that principal had it left it in their office and now that school's damaged or whatever, they don't have that data. So again, you know, going where we keep things up in the cloud, regardless As long as you can get to the web, you can get that information, you get to see it. And plus, you're not leaving that data, making a bunch of copies and then leaving it other places where it could get compromised. Again, so we're protecting that data at the same time sharing it to a wider audience and making sure we get to do that.
In order to serve the mission, it's critical to bring the information that we have, that we've collected at our schools, get them out of the Microsoft applications, get them out of three-ring binders, and get it into a source of truth that, number one, is far more secure, but then secondarily can be accessed, in a moment's notice. Very famously, around this headquarters, we've been talking about an event, an incident out of Dallas, just in the last couple of months, where fire rolled to the scene of a burning building. And as they started to talk about, what was happening in the building with one of the principals that was at that site, the fire commander asked, "Is there any hazmat in the facility?" And the answer was yes, there is hazardous material in there. And this is something that we catalog in haystacks, for example. And he said, "Well, what is it and where is it?" And they said, I really can't tell you. That information is in the three-ring binder that's burning inside the building. So how useful is that, right? Especially that the building, by the way, was totaled. It probably could have been saved had fire been able to send souls in, but they couldn't. So in that case, Doug, it's not just a preference of bringing data out of three-ring binders and other applications that, again, are insecure, but rather getting them into, this source of truth platform so it can be accessed not only from your laptop, but also from your tablet or from your phone, no matter what it is. And I know that we see this with our customers around the nation, particularly in our fusion centers that we support, that bring together critical infrastructure, law enforcement, fire, EMS, et cetera. Anything that you want to add to that particular topic?
Actually, one of the things you think about it when things are up in the web and you do it. So again, Chief talked about the mandates. The school safety risk assessment is required to be submitted on midnight, October 1, hell or high water. The way the statute reads, even the governor can't give any leeway on that. Guess when hurricane season is, and guess when the West Coast gets hit. I will tell you, the mandate has made it where we're tracking and seeing which schools hadn't submitted it. There was a school in South Florida where their superintendent, again, Chief talked about the superintendent is to actually could lose their salary if they don't comply with this, right? The superintendent sent their school safety specialist across the state so that he could get connectivity to the internet so they could submit those SSRAs. And again, those SSRAs are tied to grant allocations and those type things. So again, if he'd have had all those SSRAs sitting on his desk that was now probably in a flood zone, they would not have been able to be compliant. And then that makes them not eligible for target hardening grants and all of those things. So again, there's just so many reasons why the cloud-based application and being able to do it. And now it was one of those things, no one was going to kind of put the finger on them, but that's how these mandates, back to what Chief talked about, is important. That superintendent in the middle of a hurricane who was doing that made sure that those things got submitted. And
well, I've not only heard about what Florida has done to advance school safety initiatives, but I've seen it in practice at their Florida National School Safety Summit. And we talk about the Florida blueprint now. It's almost part of our lexicon. How do we get other states to look at what Florida has done? Because they seem to be in Florida ahead of the curve in terms of not only organizing school safety, but also then again bringing everything into a unified intelligence safety hub. How do we get other states to start having that conversation, and where does it begin? Is it at the local level? Is it at the legislature? Is it a partnership between the two?
So I hope it's not at the local level because, after doing 30 years with Tampa PD, leaving as the assistant chief, coming over to the district, I started implementing some things that I would consider industry standards. And then after Parkland, things I was already doing, like already having access to haystacks. They took us out. They came up with some really good ideas. I had to stop what I'm doing, be in compliance. I really think it has to happen with your legislators, because that's who holds the purse strings, right? They're going to be able to call the shots. The first Florida Association of School District Superintendents that convened after Parkland, Sheriff Gualtieri, who was the chair. And what they did with this, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission, they picked 5 representatives from the House, 5 from the Senate, 5 at-large members, and they chose Sheriff Gualtieri, who Doug and I have known for 35 years, as the chairperson for that committee. And there are 2 parents that sit on that committee. Max Schachter, whose son was murdered, along with Ryan Petty, whose daughter was murdered. And the very first thing they said, what went wrong? They wanted to know what went wrong. And that became the template for everything that's happened since then, whether it's hardening or mental health. It happened at a good time because the legislation was getting ready to convene. So it didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. The priority for then Governor Scott was to get it done. And they've also made money available, which is huge, right? And if you're a bigger district, you got more money because you have more moving parts. And then if you're a smaller district, you still got funds, but obviously it wasn't as the same as the large districts. So they didn't care what you did. Like, for example, one of the very first things they did, you had to have an armed asset on every campus. Well, mostly every school districts, middle schools and high schools, were already being covered by law enforcement through an MOA, right? You're paying them probably 50% FTE and they cover your sites. Nobody was covering elementary schools. Nothing happens on elementary schools unless you live in Sandy Hook, right? Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a priority, even for our district. Now I had to put somebody at 151 elementaries. Law enforcement couldn't cover that. So they told you what the goal was, and they came up with the Guardian program. And that really is to put a good guy or gal on your campus with a gun. That could be a teacher. That could be an administrator. It could be law enforcement. For us, we just made my department 5 times bigger, right? So you go to Monroe County, which is the Everglades and the Keys. It's not very well populated unless you're down in Key West, right? They have 4 guardians on their high school, Monroe High School, in the middle of the Everglades, with 1 SRO. You want to know why? Cops aren't coming when bad things happen. They're in the middle of nowhere. So the rule was you have to have an armed asset on the campus. How you get there is up to you. So they gave you the goal, and then your resource allocation got you to that goal. That's good because it worked for small counties, medium-sized counties, and large counties. For me, it was just a matter of using what I'd already put the data in the FSAT. So when they created the SSRA, I was already doing that. So when we asked for items like more fencing, I could justify it because every year we have to do a public safety walkthrough, and I could show, look, out of our 257 schools, 200 of them need better fencing. We saw that in the vulnerability assessment. So it gave me leverage to say what I needed. So it gives you proof that that's where your vulnerability is. So it's a little bit different for us because we live in those mandates, but you shouldn't count on a body count to make that happen. And I apologize for our Texas colleagues, but we had Santa Fe High School that happened a few months after Parkland in 2018. You had 8 students and 2 faculty members murdered. Why did we have a Uvalde? There should have been mandates. And there were some very talented, I work from some very talented folks in Texas. Why did we not have mandates when Uvalde happened? Right off the bat, they didn't have a one good guy with a gun to one campus. They had, officers covering sites. So you hope not to have a body count situation because like Sheriff Gualtieri said, you can't teach dead kids. This should be a no-brainer and a win for every legislator. Every legislator person, I don't care where you're at in the political environment, it should be a no-brainer that you want kids to go to school and come home safely. That should not be an unreasonable request when you're looking at your money. And I think that's where they need to start, is at that level.
Doug, your feedback on that point.
No, I think so. As we've gone around the country and Kirk says we kind of talk about the Florida model. The biggest thing is cops will tell you, the school district will tell you, unless we have a mandate, we're probably not going to be able to do it because there's other mandates that they have, there's different things they have. So by making those mandates priority. And I do think from again, we talked about we were already in serving DOE prior to Parkland. He had those mandates, but guess who had to meet those mandates first? That was us. We had to meet those mandates so that he could report that he's doing those mandates. So when that whole thing happened, we as a company were having to jump. We were having to change the SSRA. We were having to do things. We were having to let a lot of people into those systems and stuff. But you know what? Everybody, I think the mantra there was, let's protect these kids. Let's get it done. And the legislature put the money there, and it eventually caught up to us. And there was some things that we were doing, and it goes. So I definitely see this as traveling a lot of the states and countries as I do things in our field operations with our current clients and other clients. I hear it all the time. If there's not a mandate, we're probably just going to try to do it. And I do think that's the key.
Yeah. Lucas, so we're moving into some technologies that need to be integrated in order for the picture to be generated, right? To begin with, on behavioral threat, what types of systems within the school district are we typically tapping into or bringing data from in order to assist with the behavioral threat assessment and management?
Yeah, I'd say it really comes down to two main systems, and that is, your student information system and then any type of incident reporting system. With the incident reporting system, it does get a little bit tricky, right? If you're bringing in something like a Stop It or one of the anonymous reporting systems, you have to have internally the ability to filter what's coming through and is an actual behavioral issue versus a kid sticking gum under the desk, things like that, right? But those are typically the focus or two main systems that we're seeing wanted implemented. I think, future state, we could be looking at OSINT information and other things along those lines, right? But I think with the current landscape, those are the two we're looking at.
With respect to some of the other tools that we see in the environment, Chief Newman, especially to you, a partner organization or company to secure passage is Centegix. So panic buttons, Alyssa's Law, those types of solutions. Are we integrating those as they arrive in our campuses as well?
We are, because it's to have a standalone platform, no matter how important the function is, that doesn't talk or collaborate with existing platforms where you can see it in one is a waste of my time. Centegix, I think in the industry in terms of Alyssa's Law, they're phenomenal. It's one click, it's a wearable. It tells you exactly where you are on a campus, X, Y, and Z coordinates. It notifies 911. You don't have to do anything. You have intercom takeovers, but that drill gets uploaded and integrates with the platform. So I'm able to see, we have to do drills every 45 days. So those drills, and I want to see drill analysis, trend analysis from the drills, all that's, integrates with your platform where I'm able to see that kind of data. So you have a different company that has a different functionality, but it still works with what you all are doing. I think we're going to see more of that with your CCTV feeds. And as AI wants to jump on your legacy camera systems to provide you another layer of protection, we'll see more of that integration. But we don't look at something, no matter how good it is, if it stands by itself. If it doesn't collaborate or integrate with existing systems that we have that we think are first rate, then we don't even talk to that vendor.
We will bring in data via APIs. We will build parsers to collect information. These types of things are important to make these systems work together. Secure Passage, we're expert at security engineering and solving those problems. So if you have disparate systems that do need to be correlated one way or another, we can bring that data in. Doug doesn't like to say this, but I do. We've never met an API we don't like. And if not, we then create the connection. But our producer, Bryce Carr, is going to give me the 5-minute warning in just a second. We're nearing the end. I do have a couple more questions that I want to head your direction. But Bryce, if there are questions coming from the field, if we have questions from those joining us locally, I'd love to see a hand. But as we go that direction, 10 years from now, team, what will be the dominant threat vector to our schools? And what under preparation would expose for us. And I'm talking about things like drones, full self-driving automobile ramming. What is it that's going to exist, 10 years from now? Cyber physical attacks, synthetic media, deep fakes. What will we be facing, and what keeps you up at night about the next problems that we might have to solve, and what would those be? That's the first time that John Newman hasn't had an answer on anything right off the bat.
But I mean, when you say that, I hope that those vectors that we're looking at, especially as we're going in the AI world, I'm hoping our kids are 100 times safer than they are right now, right? Regardless of what it is. Hopefully we stay students of the game. We whatever it is, jokingly saying, buses that drive themselves or whatever, there's always going to be threats out there. But I think you always have to stay on your toes, stay a student of the game, learn, unfortunately, a lot of times from the last incident that happened, but pay attention. This is not one of those things where you log off today and you come back next year and you're good to go again, right? October 1 in Florida, the system doesn't shut down until next, May when they start doing the assessments again. It's used all the time. And I think regardless of what's coming in 10 years, I think as long as you're staying in it and you're proactively working it, I think that's going to be the key. And I think the thing that keeps me up at night when you think about these things is the fact that there aren't people who are students of the games. There aren't people who are tracking that thing. And I think regardless of what the threat is, that is the main threat where people just leer in, oh, we're safe. It didn't happen here or it couldn't happen here.
What keeps me up at night is fidelity, to what Doug alluded to. I've got 17,000 teachers. They've got to keep their doors locked during instructional period, the end. There's no ambiguity in that policy or that mandate. I'm as good as my weakest teacher. So all the things that we're talking about now, all the features that your platform provides and other companies provide, educators have to get out of the notion that security is somebody else's problem. Security is everyone's problem, from the janitor to the teacher to the principal to the regional superintendent, right to the boss. And when you have that mindset, fidelity is automatic. So what keeps me up of all the great things that we provided and the support that we've gotten in my district over the last 10 years, since I've been there, definitely the last 7 years, is whether or not they're taking advantage of those things, and it becomes their everyday, part of their work. It's their way of work, and they're doing it second nature. That's what keeps me up, because I know there's teachers out there that say security is not my problem, it's somebody else's problem. And with that mindset, you're never going to have a win. You can have all the greatest platforms in the world out there, and if they're thinking they don't have any ownership in that or any responsibility in that, I don't know if it's a program or a vector. I think it's a mindset that I'd like to see in 10 years, that we're not going to have another student lost to an active assailant because that educational community embrace the idea that their safety is as important as, reading, writing, and arithmetic, So
right.
To me, it's a mindset of fidelity.
So the mindset is important. And Lucas, you're in the tech trenches every day. What are the teams at the schools, saying from that fidelity perspective?
Well, I did want to highlight, I'm sorry to not answer this directly, but, coming from really what I was saying at the beginning, as the technology evolves and the landscape evolves, so are the attacks. AI can be used for good, but the people that are writing the programs can be utilizing those things for bad. You can sift through an insane amount of data instantly. And that can put the wrong information in the wrong hands. So that is probably the biggest thing that worries me for future state. Right now, AI it hasn't superseded human intelligence, in my opinion, at least from what I've seen. It's only as powerful as who's directing it. But those bad actors, can direct it as well, right? In order to expose vulnerabilities. And at some point, it may evolve past human intelligence, right? I think that's a overall theme in general across every AI, that we're looking at right now. So, like I said, with increased ability to protect, also the data out there can increase your vulnerabilities, and that's why it's extremely important to be proactive. We talked about proactivity a lot of times here, but ensuring that your data is not getting leaked out there is going to be one of the most critical components of safety and security across all sectors. But specifically with K through 12, that's our most important sector, right? The children.
We are actively pursuing the creation of AI agents to be able to complete certain workflows. There is absolutely no doubt, and you've kind of alluded this as you've answered the question. There's certainly no doubt that there's going to be threat vectors that we will see coming, and that we will use agentic AI or other forms of that heavy machine learning to understand the situation and be able to respond to the situation going forward. We are at time. We are grateful to our panelists today, Chief Newman and Doug. Thank you for making the trek up from Tampa. It's great to have you here in Kansas City. And Lucas from Chicago, great to have you here as well. It's been an important discussion for us to have because, these types of conversations are really designed to cut through platitudes, to cut through the nice talk around what is school safety. And as a person that spent 25 years in education, I know we have a lot of big bear hugs and a conversation around things that go well and should be a light touch when it comes to our faculty, students, and staff. But the truth is, we must be vigilant around safety and security, and we have to deliver an ecosystem where folks can have a reasonable expectation that they'll drop their kids off at school and they'll pick them up safely at the end of the day. From all of us at Secure Passage here in Kansas City and around the nation, along with the audience that we have with us today, all of you participating, we're grateful that you did. Secure Passage, we will help you with your advanced analytics around building what is a unified intelligence solution for you and your districts. We're grateful to the team that we have here today, all of the folks and producers here at Secure Passage. Thank you for making that happen. Chris Hogan and Bryce Carr, we appreciate everything. To the team, thank you very much. We're signing off from Kansas City. Have a great day and be safe.